The first time Hogwarts hears thunder indoors, every candle in the Great Hall goes out at once. You're sitting at your house table, fork halfway to your mouth, when the enchanted ceiling, that perfect mirror of the Scottish sky, splits open like a wound. Not metaphorically, not magically in the gentle way you've come to expect from this castle of wonders. The stone and spell boundary between inside and outside tears apart with a sound like the universe screaming, and blue-white lightning pours through in a column so bright it burns after images into your vision. The roast chicken on your plate starts smoking, the goblets rattle, and every portrait on every wall begins shrieking warnings in dead languages you don't understand, but feel in your bones. The lightning doesn't fade, it pools. Hundreds of students watch in paralyzed silence as the impossible light gathers itself on the flagstones between the house tables, condensing like liquid metal, crackling with electricity that makes your hair stand on end from 30 feet away. The air tastes like copper and ozone and something else, something ancient and foreign that doesn't belong in this castle, in this country, maybe in this world. Then the light collapses inward with a thunderclap so loud it cracks 3 windows, and when your vision clears, there's a crater in the floor. A crater in Hogwarts. The stones are glowing red at the edges, melting slightly, and in the center of that impossible wound stands a man. He's tall, impossibly tall, easily 7 feet of muscle and armor, and a red cape that's still smoking at the edges, smoldering like it just flew through a star. Blonde hair falls past his shoulders, wild and battle-worn, and in his right hand he grips a hammer that looks like it was forged before words existed, before magic existed, before anything you recognize as civilization carved itself out of the dark. The hammer's head crackles with residual lightning. The man's chest heaves with exhausted breaths, and when he raises his head, his eyes sweep across the Great Hall with the confused wariness of a warrior who's just woken up on an unknown battlefield. Those eyes are blue, painfully, inhumanly blue, like staring into an electrical storm that somehow achieved consciousness and decided to wear flesh. Silence, complete, suffocating silence. 1,000 students frozen like statues. The teachers at the high table half risen from their seats, wands drawn but held low, uncertain. Even the ghosts have stopped drifting. The bloody Baron hovers near the Slytherin table, mouth open in an expression you've never seen on his usually impassive face, something between awe and territorial dread. Dumbledore stands slowly, his silver beard catching what little light remains from the torches still burning on the walls. His face calm, but his wand hand tense. McGonagall's lips are pressed so thin they've disappeared, her entire body coiled like a spring. And you can't breathe. You literally cannot make your lungs work because something in your wizard-raised hindbrain is screaming that the man in the crater isn't a man at all. The stranger takes a step forward, boot crunching on melted stone, and every wand in the room rises an inch. He stops, his eyes narrow, tracking the movement, reading the threat. You see intelligence there, and exhaustion, and something else, a kind of bone-deep wariness that comes from fighting too long, from being a soldier too many centuries in a row. His free hand lifts slightly, palm out, the universal gesture for peace. His mouth opens. Words come out in a language you don't recognize, deep and resonant, each syllable carrying weight like stones dropped in deep water. The translation spell woven into Hogwarts foundations kicks in with a visible shimmer, and suddenly you understand him. I mean no harm. I am Thor, son of Odin, of Asgard. Where am I? Professor Flitwick, from somewhere near the staff table, makes a small squeaking sound. Hermione Granger, because of course it's Hermione, whispers loud enough for half the Gryffindor table to hear. That's impossible. Norse mythology. He's supposed to be a myth. Muggles made him up. Or maybe wizards made him up. And Muggles remembered. But he can't be real. He can't be standing here. The wards should have. Her voice cuts off as Thor's eyes lock onto her. Not threatening, just noticing, cataloging. The way a general catalogs terrain before a battle. Several students start crying. Quietly, but you hear them. The kind of crying that happens when your understanding of reality cracks, and you're too young to know how to rebuild it. Dumbledore speaks, his voice carrying that carefully modulated calm he uses when everything is absolutely not calm. You are at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, in Scotland, on Earth, though I suspect you knew that last part. His blue eyes so pale compared to Thor's electric blue. Study the god with the intensity of a man solving a puzzle that might explode. Mr. Thor, I must ask, how did you bypass our wards? How did you tear through magical space itself? And more importantly, Dumbledore's wand rises slightly, and you see golden light beginning to gather at its tip. Are you the herald of an invasion, or merely lost? The hammer in Thor's hand sparks once, a warning, and every combat-trained professor in the room shifts their stance. The air pressure changes. You feel it in your ears, that subtle pop that happens before a storm breaks, and you realize with dawning horror that the enchanted ceiling isn't showing the Scottish sky anymore. It's showing what's directly above the castle, real time, and there are clouds gathering that weren't there 30 seconds ago. Dark, roiling clouds shot through with veins of lightning, swirling in patterns that don't match British weather or any weather you've ever learned about in astronomy. They're swirling around Hogwarts like a crown, like a cage, like a declaration. Thor hasn't attacked. He's barely moved, but the sky itself is answering him, bending to him, and you understand with absolute certainty that the castle, the wards, the ancient protections, every spell woven into these stones for 1,000 years, has no idea what to do with him. And far away, in a graveyard in Little Hangleton, something that was once a man and is now much less, and much more, feels the disturbance in the magical currents of Britain, feels the arrival of something that smells like power and threat and opportunity. Voldemort's lipless mouth curves into something that might be a smile, and he whispers to the darkness, "Show me." The headmaster's office smells like old parchment and phoenix ash, and you're not supposed to be here. But Hermione actually argued with McGonagall, that witnesses should be present for historical documentation, and somehow you ended up pressed against the wall behind a cabinet of silver instruments, watching a god sit in a chair meant for students. Thor looks absurd and terrifying in equal measure, his armored bulk making Dumbledore's furniture seem like dollhouse pieces, the hammer resting across his knees like a sleeping predator. Fawkes, Dumbledore's phoenix, hasn't stopped singing since Thor entered the room. Not the usual gentle trill, but something higher and more urgent, like a warning alarm, translated into music. The portraits of former headmasters whisper constantly, their painted faces pressed against their frames, trying to hear everything. Dumbledore sits across from Thor, 2 cups of tea steaming on the desk between them, one untouched, one ignored. Let me ensure I understand correctly. master says, his voice carrying that particular patience he uses when reality has become negotiable. You are a prince of a realm called Asgard, which exists in what you describe as one of the 9 realms connected by a cosmic structure called Yggdrasil. You were engaged in combat with a creature called a Cronin, when something you're not certain what disrupted the Bifrost, which is a bridge made of rainbow light that allows instantaneous travel between worlds. Dumbledore's fingers steeple beneath his chin. McGonagall, standing rigid beside the desk, looks like she's physically restraining herself from interrupting. Snape, lurking in the shadows near the stairwell, has an expression of such profound skepticism. It borders on autistic. Thor nods slowly, his accent strange, formal but not British, old but not antiquated, each word chosen with the care of someone speaking a language learned centuries ago and rarely updated. The Bifrost is not a bridge of light, wizard. It is the bridge of light, the only bridge built by those who came before even Asgard's founding. When it functions correctly, it pulls a traveler through the fabric of space, through the gaps between your realms and mine, depositing them exactly where they need to be. His hand tightens on the hammer's handle, knuckles whitening. Something interrupted mid-transit. I felt the pull redirect, felt reality twist in ways it should not twist, and then I was here, in your stone hall full of children who wield power they barely understand. It's not an insult. You realize that immediately. It's an observation delivered with the bluntness of a soldier, and somehow that makes it worse. Children who wield power, McGonagall repeats, her Scottish accent sharpening into something dangerous. Mr. Thor, I'll have you know that Hogwarts has produced some of the finest witches and wizards in. She stops as Thor stands, not aggressively, just stands, and the room shrinks around him. The ceiling feels lower, the walls feel thinner. Falk's song climbs another octave. In my experience, Thor says quietly, true mastery of power comes not from schooling but from sacrifice, from holding the power to destroy and choosing restraint. I have seen civilizations far older than yours crumble because they forgot that lesson. I do not doubt your children's potential, Professor. I question whether they have faced the crucible that tempers potential into certainty. His eyes find yours across the room. You freeze, barely breathing, and then move on. He knows you're there. He's known the entire time.
Dumbledore stands as well, positioning himself subtly between Thor and McGonagall, the movement so smooth you almost miss it. You speak of civilizations, plural, of realms, beyond our own. And yet, Mr. Thor, our records, our extensive historical records, contain no mention of Asgard beyond human mythology. The Muggle world believes you to be a story invented by Norse tribes. The wizarding world has no record of contact with beings matching your description. There's a challenge in Dumbledore's voice, gentle but unmistakable, which raises a question. If Asgard is real and possesses the ability to travel between worlds, why have you never made contact with Earth's magical community? Surely we would have noticed guards walking among us. Thor's laugh is bitter and short, like metal scraping stone. Noticed, wizard, my people, have walked your world for millennia. We did not hide. We fought alongside humans against threats they could not name. We taught them to forge metal, to read the stars, to defend themselves against creatures that crawl between the gaps in your daylight. And when we left, when my father decreed that Earth's evolution must proceed without Asgardian intervention, your people rewrote us as myths, as stories, as safe, distant legends that couldn't challenge your new order. He leans forward,
and the hammer thrums with barely contained energy. You built your walls and your secrecy, and your ministries, and you convinced yourselves that magic made you the apex of this world. But magic is not the only power in this universe. It is not even the greatest. And now one of those greater powers stands before you, and you scramble to fit me into categories that were always too small. Snape moves then, stepping from the shadows with his wand drawn, not pointed, but ready. Careful creature, you speak of power, but you sit in the heart of one of the most heavily warded locations on this planet. Whatever you are, whatever realm you claim to hail from, you are currently surrounded by witches and wizards who could reduce you to ash before your hammer left your hand. His voice drips with venom, but you notice his wand hand trembles slightly, just slightly. Thor doesn't even look at him, doesn't need to. The temperature in the room drops, and frost begins creeping across the window panes. Not from Thor, you realize with shock, but from the wards themselves responding to the threat Snape just made, recognizing Thor as something they need to protect, or protect against. The distinction suddenly seems very unclear. The moment stretches, brittle and dangerous, until Fawkes launches from his perch and lands directly on Thor's shoulder. The phoenix, wreathed in flame and regeneration, and all the symbolic weight of Dumbledore's authority, settles against the god like he belongs there, like he's been there before. Thor's face softens, the first genuine emotion you've seen break through his warrior's mask, and he raises one hand to gently stroke Fawkes' plumage. "Hello, little son," he murmurs, and the phoenix trills something that sounds almost like laughter. Dumbledore's eyes widen fractionally, the first crack in his composure. You know what that means. Everyone in this room knows what that means. Fawkes only approaches the worthy, only trusts those aligned with light and sacrifice, and the hard, terrible choices that come with protecting others. Whatever Thor is, whatever threat he might pose, Dumbledore's own phoenix has just vouched for him. Dumbledore sinks slowly back into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 100+ years. "Well then," he says softly, and you hear genuine uncertainty in his voice for the first time in your years at Hogwarts. "It seems we find ourselves at an impasse, Mr. Thor. You cannot return home without your Bifrost. We cannot allow you to wander freely without understanding what your presence means for the delicate balance we maintain in this world. And time, I suspect, is not on our side." His eyes drift to the window, where the storm clouds you saw in the Great Hall still swirl, darker now, angrier. The Ministry will have detected the ward breach by now. They'll arrive within the hour, and when they do, they will demand answers we do not yet have. So tell me, Prince of Asgard, what would you have us do? What would you do if you were in my position, facing the unknown, with the safety of 1,000 children hanging in the balance? Thor is silent for a long moment, his hand still resting on Fawkes, his eyes distant. When he speaks, his voice carries the weight of ages, of battles won and lost, of kingdoms risen and fallen. "I would prepare for war," he says simply, "because something brought me here, something with enough power to twist the Bifrost and tear through your defenses like parchment. That kind of power does not act randomly, Dumbledore. It acts with purpose. And if it wanted me here, in this place, at this time," he meets the headmaster's eyes, and you see fear there for the first time, real fear. "Then you are already at the center of a conflict you do not yet understand, and keeping me contained will not save your children. It will only ensure they face what's coming, without the one weapon that might make a difference.
The ministry delegation appears in the entrance hall, exactly 43 minutes after Thor's arrival, and you watch from the marble staircase as 12 crimson-robed officials materialize in a coordinated apparition that leaves scorch marks on Hogwarts' ancient stones. Leading them is a woman you recognize from Daily Prophet photographs, Amelia Bones, head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, her square jaw set in an expression of bureaucratic determination that doesn't quite hide the fear in her eyes. Behind her stand auras with wands drawn, hit wizards with detection spells already swirling around their hands. Your stomach drops. Dolores Umbridge, Senior Undersecretary to the Minister, her toad-like face stretched in a smile that promises suffering, dressed as procedure. The portraits lining the walls have gone silent, watching with the collective wariness of painted witnesses who've seen this dance before. The Ministry arriving to assert control over something they don't understand. Dumbledore descends the main staircase with theatrical slowness, Thor walking beside him like a storm given human shape, the hammer still held casually in one hand, as if it weighs nothing. McGonagall and Snape flank them, a united front that would be reassuring if you couldn't feel the tension vibrating between all four of them. Students crowd every available doorway and corridor opening. You're packed shoulder to shoulder with Ravenclaws on the stairs, Gryffindors hanging over the second floor railing, even Slytherins abandoning their usual disdain to crane their necks for a better view. The whispers build like static electricity. That's him, the Thunder Man. My dad works at the Ministry. He says they're terrified. He doesn't even have a wand. How is he doing magic? That's not magic, idiot. That's something else entirely. Hermione stands 3 steps below you, quill and parchment already out, documenting everything with the manic intensity of someone who knows they're witnessing history being written in real time. Headmaster Dumbledore, Amelia Bones says without preamble, her voice carrying the clipped authority of someone who's delivered bad news to powerful people many times before. I'm here on direct orders from Minister Fudge to assess and contain the security breach that occurred at approximately 7:30 this evening. Our ward monitors detected a catastrophic failure in Hogwarts' protective enchantments, followed by an unregistered magical signature of unprecedented magnitude. Her eyes lock onto Thor, scanning him from head to foot with the clinical precision of someone cataloging a dangerous animal. I assume this is the source. It's not really a question. Thor regards her with the same patient wariness you've seen him use with everyone, like a warrior trying to determine if the person in front of him is an enemy or merely ignorant. The hammer in his hand sparks once, just once, and 3 auroras step forward reflexively, wands rising. Madam Bones, Dumbledore says, and there's steel beneath the grandfatherly tone now. May I introduce Thor of Asgard, Prince of a realm beyond our current understanding, who arrived here through no fault of his own, and under circumstances we are still investigating. He is my guest, under the protection of Hogwarts, and I must insist that any assessment be conducted with the appropriate diplomatic considerations. The phrase diplomatic considerations lands like a stone in still water, sending ripples through the Ministry delegation. You see Umbridge's smile widen fractionally. She's scented blood. You realize scented an opportunity to undermine Dumbledore's authority. Guest, Headmaster, she says in that breathy, girlish voice that makes your skin crawl. Or prisoner, because I'm quite certain there are protocols for unregistered magical beings who tear through our most sacred protections. Protocols that don't include tea in your office. Thor speaks before Dumbledore can respond, his voice cutting through the political posturing like lightning through fog. I am neither guest nor prisoner. Little woman, I am Thor, son of Odin, and I bow to no government I do not recognize. He takes a single step forward, and the entrance hall seems to darken. Not literally, but you feel it. A pressure change in reality itself. I came to your world by accident. I have harmed no one. I have made no demands. But I will not be catalogued like livestock or imprisoned, because your systems cannot comprehend what I am. The Aurora's wands rise higher, spells gathering at the tips in warning flashes of light. One of them, a scarred man with an eye patch, whispers urgently to Bones, "Mom, the readings, whatever he is, he's generating enough raw energy to power half of London. If he becomes hostile in an enclosed space like this," he doesn't finish the sentence, doesn't need to. Umbridge steps forward, somehow managing to look both delighted and terrified, her stubby fingers clasped in front of her pink cardigan. Threatening ministry officials is a serious crime, Mr. Thor, one that carries significant consequences, regardless of your claimed royal status. Now, if you'll simply cooperate with our investigation, submit to a few harmless tests to determine whether you pose a danger to the wizarding community, I'm certain we can resolve this unfortunate situation with minimal fuss. She pulls out a roll of parchment, unfurling it with
theatrical flourish. We have prepared a standard containment agreement, which would require you to wear a magical suppression bracelet, submit to daily monitoring, and refrain from using any abilities beyond. She stops. Thor is laughing, not cruelly, but with the genuine amusement of someone who's heard this speech in 12 languages across 1,000 worlds, and it never stops being absurd. Suppression bracelet, Thor repeats, testing the words like foreign wine. Tell me, bureaucrat, what makes you think your trinkets could suppress the power of Asgard? What makes you think I would allow such disrespect even if they could? His free hand extends, palm up, and electricity arcs between his fingers in patterns too complex to follow, forming shapes that might be letters in a language predating human civilization. I have fought beside heroes and against gods. I have held the fabric of reality together with my will alone. I have died and returned, been cast down and risen again, and through all of it I have never surrendered my power to bureaucrats who mistake paperwork for actual authority. The lightning in his hand collapses into a single point of white-hot light, then disperses harmlessly. If you wish to test whether I am dangerous, attempt to place your bracelet on me. I promise you will receive a definitive answer. The standoff freezes there, violence hanging in the air like a drawn blade, and you realize with sick certainty that someone is going to cast the first spell. Someone is going to make the catastrophically stupid decision that starts a battle in a school full of children. But then a voice cuts through the tension, young, clear, and absolutely furious. You're all being idiots. Luna Lovegood steps out from behind a suit of armor near the Great Hall entrance, her wand pointed at the floor, but her eyes fixed on the ministry delegation with an intensity you've never seen from the usually dreamy Ravenclaw. Can't you see the Raxbirds swarming around all of you? They feed on fear and stupidity, and right now they're having an absolute feast. She walks forward calmly, bare feet silent on the stone, until she's standing directly between Thor and the auras. He's not the threat, he's the warning. Something pushed him here, something that could bend space itself, and you're all so busy trying to control him that you're not asking why. Thor looks down at Luna, this small, strange girl with blonde hair like dandelion fluff, and a complete absence of fear. and something in his expression shifts. You see recognition there, not of Luna specifically, but of a type, the Oracle, the Seer, the one who sees patterns others miss. You understand, he says simply. Luna nods, tilting her head like a bird examining something fascinating. I understand that scared people make scared decisions, and scared decisions start wars that consume everyone. I also understand that you're very far from home, and probably quite sad about it, even if you're too proud to say so. She extends one hand, the gesture somehow managing to be both childlike and impossibly ancient. My name is Luna. I'm in Ravenclaw, which means I ask too many questions and notice things I'm not supposed to notice. And I think you being here means something important is about to happen. Something that will require all of us to be much braver than we thought possible. So perhaps we should stop pointing weapons at each other and start preparing for whatever comes next. The silence that follows Luna's speech is broken by Amelia Bones, slowly, deliberately, lowering her wand. Stand down, she orders her auras, her voice rough with the effort of choosing wisdom over protocol. Headmaster Dumbledore, I am placing Thor of Asgard in your custody pending further investigation. But make no mistake, if he harms even one student, if he so much as threatens the security of this school, the full might of the ministry will descend on Hogwarts regardless of your protection. She turns to leave, then pauses. And Dumbledore, whatever is coming, whatever pushed him here, I hope you're ready for it. Because the rest of us certainly aren't. The ministry delegation dissipates in a coordinated crack of displaced air, leaving only scorch marks and the lingering scent of ozone and fear. You watch as Thor kneels slowly, bringing himself to eye level with Luna, and speaks words meant only for her, but heard by everyone in the suddenly silent hall. You are right, young seer. I am far from home, and I am indeed sad. But sadness is a warrior's companion, and I have learned to fight alongside it. Thank you for seeing me as I am, rather than as what you fear I might be. By breakfast the next morning, Hogwarts has split into 3 distinct camps, and you can see the fracture lines running through every house table like cracks in ice. The Gryffindors are loud in their support. Harry Potter himself declared at dinner last night that anyone who scares Umbridge that badly can't be all evil, and his friends have taken up the banner with typical reckless enthusiasm. Ron Weasley spent 20 minutes theorizing whether Thor could beat a dragon in single combat. Dean Thomas started sketching the hammer with an artist's obsessive detail. Even Neville Longbottom, usually quiet about controversial topics, pointed out that Fawkes wouldn't have landed on Thor if he meant harm. The Gryffindor common room apparently debated until 3 in the morning, and you can see the exhaustion and excitement warring on their faces as they pile eggs onto plates and argue over toast about whether Asgardian lightning counts as a spell or something else entirely. The Ravenclaws have approached Thor's arrival as an intellectual crisis, and their table buzzes with frantic theory crafting that makes your head hurt just overhearing it. Hermione has produced 4 feet of parchment, analyzing the magical signature Thor left on the Great Hall floor, complete with diagrams comparing it to known cosmic magic, elemental manipulation, and something she's calling pre-Atlantean reality bending. Cho Chang is reading everything the library has on Norse mythology, cross-referencing it with astronomy charts to figure out where Asgard might physically exist. Michael Corner has started a betting pool on whether Thor's hammer is sentient, cursed, or both. The debates get heated. Anthony Goldstein threw a book at Terry Boot last night, when Terry suggested Thor might be a very advanced Muggle weapon. But there's an electric energy to the Ravenclaw arguments,
a sense that they're witnessing something unprecedented, and the only appropriate response is to document every detail. The Hufflepuffs are terrified, not of Thor specifically, but of what he represents: chaos, uncertainty, the destruction of the careful predictability that keeps them safe. You overhear Hannah Abbott crying to Susan Bones that her parents are talking about pulling her out of school, that the Daily Prophet is running headlines about dangerous unknown entities harbored at Hogwarts, that the Ministry might shut down the castle if they can't guarantee student safety. Justin Finch Fletchley keeps asking anyone who'll listen whether Thor could be imperioused, could be controlled by you-know-who, could be a Trojan horse hiding a darker purpose. Ernie Macmillan tried to organize a petition demanding Thor be handed over to the Ministry, but it fell apart when Professor Sprout gently pointed out that such action would likely result in violence. None of them were prepared for. The Hufflepuff table is quieter than usual, students huddled in tight groups, seeking comfort in numbers while the world shifts beneath their feet. And the Slytherins watch and calculate and whisper among themselves with the cold pragmatism of vipers sensing opportunity in chaos. Draco Malfoy holds court at the center of their table, his pale face animated with a cunning you've learned to fear. My father says the Ministry is paralyzed, he announces loudly enough for neighboring tables to hear. They can't contain him, can't control him, can't even properly categorize him, which means he's a free agent, which means he's available to the highest bidder. Pansy Parkinson nods eagerly, but Blaze Abini looks skeptical, his dark eyes thoughtful. And what exactly would you bid, Draco? What could any of us possibly offer a creature that treats magic like a child's toy? Draco's smile is sharp and cold. Not what we can offer, what we can threaten. Everyone has something they fear losing, even gods. The conversation dies there as Professor Snape materializes behind them like a shadow given form. But the damage is done. The idea has been planted. Thor is powerful, yes, but power can be leveraged, manipulated, aimed like a weapon at your enemies. You find Luna in the library that afternoon, sitting cross-legged on a table, near the restricted section with Thor standing nearby, examining a shelf of books with the confused expression of someone trying to read a language they almost but don't quite recognize. The other students give them a wide berth, curiosity warring with fear. No one quite brave enough to approach, but everyone desperate to observe. Luna has a copy of ancient runes and pre-Celtic symbol systems open in her lap, and is explaining something about the difference between written magic and spoken magic while Thor listens with surprising patience. You see, Luna says in her dreamy voice, wizards write magic because we're afraid of forgetting it. We put spells in books so they'll outlast us. But you don't need books, do you? Your magic is in your bones, in your blood, in the way you breathe. It's jealous magic, old magic, the kind that doesn't share well with our modern versions. Thor settles onto the floor, too large for the student chairs, too restless to stand, and the movement somehow makes him seem less threatening, more human. Your friend speaks truth, he says, and it takes you a moment to realize he's addressing you directly. On Asgard, we do not learn magic from scrolls and teachers. We are born into it, shaped by it, the same way you are shaped by gravity and time. My mother Frigga could weave illusions so perfect they fooled even the all-seeing Heimdall. My brother Loki could reshape his very form, become wind and shadow and serpent, but neither learned these gifts from study. They simply were. His hand rests on the hammer, always the hammer, and you wonder if he even realizes he does it, the way a soldier might constantly check their weapon, an unconscious gesture born from battles too numerous to count. Your wizards segregate magic from the mundane. You hide it, control it, fence it in with rules and ministries. On Asgard, magic is life. There is no separation. The conversation is interrupted by a commotion at the library entrance. Madame Pince's outraged shriek, followed by the unmistakable sound of the Weasley twins, Fred and George,
tumble through the doors, arms loaded with what looks like Zonko's entire inventory, grinning with the manic energy of entrepreneurs who've just spotted a business opportunity. Oz Thor, my excellent, potentially divine friend, Fred calls out, ignoring Pince's hissed threats. Urisham tumble through the doors, arms loaded with what looks like Zonko's entire Vindort. We have a proposition for you, George finishes, sliding to a stop in front of the guard. We're inventors, you see, purveyors of chaos, masters of the unexpected prank. They dump their products onto Luna's table, portable swamps, skiving snack boxes, decoy detonators, Peruvian instant darkness powder, and we're wondering, Fred says conspiratorially, what happens when lightning meets a portable swamp? Can your hammer trigger darkness powder? Could you theoretically charge our decoy detonators with actual electricity? George leans in, eyes gleaming. We're talking about a collaboration, Thor. Science meets magic, chaos meets divine wrath. We'll split the profits 60-40, 70-30, Fred interjects. And all we need is access to that magnificent hammer of yours for some totally safe, completely non-explosive experiments. Thor stares at them for a long moment, his expression unreadable, and you're certain he's about to refuse, to dismiss them as foolish children playing with forces they don't understand. Then he laughs, a real laugh, deep and genuine and surprised, the kind of laugh that transforms his face from warrior to something younger, more reckless. You remind me of my brother, he says, before the darkness took him. Always scheming, always pushing boundaries, convinced that rules were suggestions for lesser minds. He picks up a decoy detonator, turning it over in his hands with genuine curiosity. Very well, inventors, I will assist your experiments. But know this, I will not harm students for your entertainment, and I will not create weapons for war. If your inventions bring joy, I will aid you. If they bring suffering, I will stop you. Do we have an accord? The twins exchange glances, communicating in that wordless way only they possess. Then both extend their hands. Deal, they say in perfect unison. And just like that, Thor of Asgard becomes the twins' unlikely business partner. That night, you stand at your common room window watching the storm clouds that have become a permanent fixture above Hogwarts since Thor's arrival. They don't rain, don't lightning, just circle endlessly, a crown of weather that marks the castle as different now, changed by the presence of something that shouldn't exist in this orderly wizarding world. Luna joins you at the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. The castle is splitting, she observes quietly, not the building, the people. Some want him to save us. Some want him to leave. Some want him to be a weapon they can point at their enemies. But nobody's asking what he wants. She presses one hand against the cold glass. He's so very lonely, you know. Gods aren't meant to be lonely. They're meant to be worshipped or feared or fought against. But Thor doesn't want any of those things. He just wants to go home. And we're all so busy deciding what he means for us that we forget he's a person who's been ripped away from everything he loves. You want to ask Luna how she knows this, how she sees through Thor's warrior exterior to the exhaustion and grief beneath. But before you can, there's a flash of movement outside. Thor walks across the grounds alone, the hammer held loosely at his side. heading toward the forbidden forest with the determined stride of someone who needs to escape, even temporarily, the weight of too many eyes. The centaurs emerge from the tree line to meet him. You can barely see them in the darkness, but their forms are unmistakable. They speak with Thor for several minutes, their body language suggesting deep conversation rather than confrontation. Then together, God and centaurs disappear into the forest, and you're left wondering what they discuss in the darkness beneath the ancient trees. What do immortals say to each other when the mortal world presses too close? What warnings do those who read the stars give to those who fall from them? You don't have answers, but watching those storm clouds circle like patient predators, you suspect you'll find out soon enough. McGonagall announces the assessment during breakfast 3 days after Thor's arrival, her voice cutting through the Great Hall chatter with the authority of someone who's made an impossible decision and refuses to second-guess it. In light of recent events, and at the request of both the headmaster and the ministry, we will be conducting a controlled evaluation of our guests' abilities this afternoon in the Quidditch Stadium. This is not entertainment. This is not a spectacle. This is a necessary safety protocol to understand what we're dealing with. Her eyes sweep across the student body with that look that makes even the Weasley twins sit up straight. Classes are cancelled for the afternoon. All students will observe from the stands under professorial supervision. There will be no commentary, no cheering, and absolutely no attempts to interfere. Am I understood? The response is a thunderous, "Yes, Professor McGonagall," but you can see the excitement rippling through every table like electricity. Students already whispering theories and predictions and bets. The stadium fills by 2 o'clock. Every seat packed, students pressed shoulder to shoulder in a way that would normally only happen for House Cup finals. The professors line the rails between sections like wardens' wands visible, ready to contain either Thor or the student body depending on who breaks first. You squeeze into a spot between Luna and Hermione, high enough to see the entire pitch. Thor stands at the center of the field, looking small despite his size, dwarfed by the massive stadium and the weight of 1,000 watching eyes. He's removed his armor, at McGonagall's request you heard, wearing only simple dark clothes that make him look less like a god and more like a very dangerous man who's agreed to let himself be studied. The hammer, of course, remains. Mjolnir rests in the grass beside him, casual as a walking stick, but you notice the way it seems to hum even from this distance, a subsonic vibration you feel in your teeth. McGonagall descends to the pitch with Flitwick at her side, both professors moving with the careful precision of duelists approaching an unknown opponent. "Mr. Thor," McGonagall begins, her Scottish accent even sharper than usual with tension. "We appreciate your cooperation in this matter. The assessment will proceed in stages, beginning with basic defensive responses and escalating only as far as necessary to establish baseline capabilities. At any point, you may request we stop. At any point, we may decide to stop. The goal is understanding, not combat. Are you prepared?" Thor nods once, sharp and military, then settles into a stance you recognize from watching him move these past days. Weight balanced, ready to spring in any direction, every muscle coiled but not tense. A warrior's stance, one that's been perfected over centuries of not dying. "I am ready, Professor. Do your worst, or your best. I suspect I will survive either." Flitwick begins, a simple, stunning spell. Red light streaking across the pitch faster than thought, and Thor doesn't dodge, doesn't raise the hammer, just stands there as the spell crashes into his chest and stops, not deflected, not absorbed,
The red light hits him and disperses like water hitting stone, spreading out in harmless ripples that fade into nothing. The crowd gasps. Flitwick's eyebrows climb toward his hairline. He tries again. More power this time. The spell bright enough to leave after images, and the result is the same impact. Dispersal. Thor standing untouched with an expression of patient endurance. Interesting. Flitwick squeaks, his professorial curiosity overtaking his caution. The magic isn't being blocked by a shield. It's being rejected. No, that's not quite right either. It's as if his body doesn't recognize the spell as a valid command. Maneuver. Perhaps something more complex. McGonagall steps forward, and her spell is a masterwork. Not a simple hex, but a cascading sequence of transfiguration that should turn the ground beneath Thor's feet into quicksand, while simultaneously conjuring iron chains from the air. The spell hits. The ground does liquefy. Thor sinks to his knees. The chains wrap around his torso with the grinding shriek of metal on metal. For 3 seconds it works. Then Thor breathes out slowly, and lightning crawls across his skin like living jewelry, not aggressive but present, and the chains shatter, not melt, shatter, exploding into fragments that ring against the stadium wards like bells. He rises from the quicksand, as if it's merely thick mud, each step deliberate, and the ground solidifies beneath him as he walks. McGonagall's expression shifts from professional assessment to something closer to academic fascination mixed with existential concern. He's not immune to magic, she announces, projecting her voice to the stands. The spells affect him, but his nature, whatever he is, fights back. It's automatic, like an immune response. The question becomes, how much magic can that response withstand before it fails? The testing escalates. Snape joins them on the pitch, his face set in lines of grim determination, and the 3 professors begin working in concert. Layered curses, elemental assaults, binding spells woven so tightly they should prevent even breathing. Thor endures. You watch him take hit after hit, see the strain building in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. He's not invulnerable. Whatever resistance he has costs him, and you realize with growing horror that the professors are essentially torturing him in the name of science, and he's letting them because he understands the necessity. A freezing charm drops the temperature around him to Arctic levels. Frost forms on his hair. His breath comes in visible clouds, but he doesn't fall. A cutting curse slashes across his arm, and this time blood flows. Actual red blood, steaming in the cold air, before the wound closes itself with crackling lightning light. The crowd has gone silent. Even the Slytherins have stopped cheering. This isn't exciting anymore. It's disturbing, watching power meet power, and trying to determine which will break first. Then McGonagall makes a decision. You see it in the set of her shoulders, the way she exchanges glances with the other professors. She's going to use the killing curse, not to kill, even she wouldn't go that far, but to test whether Avada Kedavra, the ultimate expression of wizardkind's destructive will, can touch whatever Thor is. The stadium seems to sense it, students leaning forward in collective dread and curiosity. McGonagall's wand rises, and her face shows the internal battle of a woman who's sworn to protect her students being forced to demonstrate the darkest magic in existence. But before she can cast, Thor moves, faster
than anything his size should move. The hammer is in his hand and swinging upward, and he's not aiming at the professors, he's aiming at the sky. Lightning answers. Not the pathetic sparks he's shown before, but a column of raw electrical fury that connects earth to cloud, to something beyond clouds, splitting the afternoon sky like the universe screaming.
The bolt hits the stadium wards and every protective enchantment Hogwarts possesses activates at once. The air turns solid, with layer upon layer of shield spells, so many and so complex they become visible as geometric patterns of light, golden equations hovering in midair, solving themselves in real time. The lightning pushes against them, not to break through but to test them, and for one infinite moment, the question hangs there: which force is greater? Ancient wizardcraft refined over a millennium, or the raw elemental power of a being who predates wizardry itself? The answer comes with a sound like glass cracking. Not breaking, cracking. Hairline fractures spread through the shield layers, thin and precise. And then Thor releases the lightning, lets it dissipate, steps back, kneels. Enough, he says, and his voice carries across the suddenly silent stadium. You have your answer, professors. I can be hurt by your magic. I can be contained, temporarily, but I cannot be killed by it. Not easily. And if pushed to truly defend myself, I would damage your protections in ways that would leave your children vulnerable. So please, let this test be finished. I have proven what you needed to prove. McGonagall's wand lowers slowly, and you see her hands shaking. The first time you've ever seen the unflappable Professor McGonagall show physical fear. Mr. Thor, she says, her voice rough, you have our gratitude for your restraint, and our apologies for the necessity. Thor rises, retrieves his armor from where it sits folded near the pitch entrance, and walks toward the castle without looking back. But before he reaches the doors, he stops, turns, looks up at the stands, and his gaze finds yours, or maybe Luna's beside you, or Hermione's, or all of you collectively. I did not come to your world to be a weapon, he says, and even without amplification magic, every syllable reaches every ear. I did not come to conquer or to rule. I came by accident, torn from battle, and thrown here by forces I do not understand. But I am here now, and I see what your world faces. I have walked among you for days, and I have seen your war brewing. The dark wizard you call Voldemort, the government that pretends evil can be legislated away, the children being trained to fight battles they're too young to understand. His hand tightens on the hammer. If I must be a weapon, I will be one wielded by justice, not by fear. Remember that in the days to come, when the choice arrives, remember which side I chose to stand on. The stadium remains silent. Long after Thor disappears into the castle, students and professors alike, processing what they've witnessed. Then from the Slytherin section, Draco Malfoy's voice carries clear and cold. Did everyone else see what I saw? He can be hurt, which means he can be killed, which means he's not a god at all, just a very powerful creature that bleeds. And across the Forbidden Forest, in a clearing marked by dark magic and darker purpose, Voldemort stands among his Death Eaters and smiles with lipless precision as Peter Pettigrew finishes his report. Master, Wormtail says. Trembling, the creature showed weakness, blood, pain. The professors found his limits. Voldemort's red eyes gleam with calculation. No, Wormtail, they showed him our limits. And now he knows exactly how little our magic frightens him, but that the Dark Lord runs one pale finger along his wand, almost lovingly, is acceptable, because I have no intention of fighting him with magic. I have far more effective weapons available. Fear, leverage, the things he has sworn to protect. Every warrior has a weakness, and this Thor has just revealed his. He cares about the children. The Death Eaters laugh, cold and eager, and somewhere in the distance thunder rumbles in warning. The headline hits the breakfast table 3 days later. delivered by 1,000 screeching owls in perfect synchronization, and you watch the color drain from faces across every house as students unfold the daily prophet to find Thor's image plastered across the front page beneath words designed to incite panic. Uncontrollable entity threatens Hogwarts students. Ministry demands immediate removal. The photograph, captured during the stadium test, shows Thor surrounded by lightning, face twisted in what the prophet has carefully framed as rage, but you recognize as pain, mid-swing with the hammer raised. The caption reads, "Dangerous creature demonstrates capacity for mass destruction," while Dumbledore watches helplessly. Rita Skeeter's byline promises exclusive interviews with concerned parents, ministry officials, and experts in dangerous magical beings. You don't need to read it to know it's propaganda, but Hermione reads it anyway, her voice shaking with fury as she summarizes the worst parts for your section of the Ravenclaw table. They're calling him a Category 5 unregistered entity. Hermione spits, her knuckles white, where she grips the parchment. Skeeter quotes an anonymous aura, saying Thor could reduce Hogwarts to rubble in minutes if he chose. She's interviewing parents who claim their children have nightmares about the thunder monster in the castle. There's a poll, an actual poll, asking readers whether Dumbledore should be removed as headmaster for harboring a threat to student safety. 53% say yes. And here, listen to this gem. Sources close to the ministry suggest that the creature calling itself Thor may be a weapon created by you-know-who, designed to infiltrate and destroy our most precious institution from within. She throws the paper down with enough force to rattle the breakfast dishes. It's brilliant, in the most horrifying way possible. They're not denying he's powerful. They're weaponizing his power against him, turning protection into threat, making parents terrified of the one thing that might actually keep their children safe. The Howlers start arriving during lunch. Dozens of them, blood-red envelopes screaming parental fury and fear across the Great Hall in overlapping waves of sound that make coherent thought impossible. Mrs. Weasley's howler to Ron demands he stay away from that creature and write home immediately confirming you're safe. Neville's grandmother sends one that questions Dumbledore's judgment so loudly the portraits on the walls cover their painted ears. Even students whose parents aren't sending howlers receive terse letters commanding they keep their heads down, avoid Thor at all costs, and prepare for possible emergency evacuation. The Ministry Owl Post arrives mid-chaos, an official decree signed by Cornelius Fudge himself, delivered on purple parchment with gold seals, announcing the formal inspection of Hogwarts scheduled for the end of the week. To ensure appropriate containment protocols are being observed and student welfare protected. Everyone knows what that means. They're coming to take Thor by force, or shut down the school, or both. The castle feels like a prison counting down to execution day. Thor himself seems unbothered by the propaganda, or at least he hides it well. You find him that afternoon in the courtyard with Luna, both of them sitting on the edge of the fountain watching the enchanted water spirits dance their eternal loops. Luna has her bare feet in the water, scandalous by Hogwarts standards, ignored by Thor's standards, and they're discussing something about the nature of time in hushed voices that carry the weight of philosophical debate. On Asgard, Thor says, skipping a stone across the water with casual precision, we measure time in seasons of battle, in the growth and fall of civilizations we protect. A century passes like your summer holiday. I have lived long enough to watch empires rise from mud and collapse into myth, and through it all I remain, unchanging, watching everyone I love age and fade while I continue. The stone sinks, Luna tilts her head, considering. That sounds terribly lonely, but also quite beautiful, in a sad way, like being a lighthouse. You stay constant so others can find their way home, even though you can never leave your post. The ministry fears you, you say, surprising yourself by speaking aloud, stepping closer to the fountain. Thor's eyes find yours, and there's something gentle in his expression that wasn't there during the stadium test. A softness he allows himself in private moments when the warrior mask isn't required. The ministry fears everything they cannot control. He replies simply, "It is the nature of governments to mistake control for safety, to believe that if they can name a thing and file it properly, they have mastered it. But I am not a creature to be filed, young scholar. I am a force of nature given consciousness and choice. They can no more control me than they can control the storms themselves." He pauses, then adds with quiet intensity, "But I do not wish to be their enemy. I did not come here to break their institutions or mock their laws. I came here by accident, and I stay because leaving is not yet possible, and because..." He trails off, looking around the courtyard at students hurrying between classes, at the castle that's become his temporary cage. "Because something in my bones tells me I am meant to be here, that the accident was not an accident, that purpose exists in this chaos, even if I cannot yet see its shape." The first Death Eater attack comes that night, and it's not an attack at all. It's a test, surgical and cold, designed to measure Thor's responses with scientific precision. You're in the library past curfew, researching an astronomy essay with Hermione and Luna, because rules feel less important when reality itself has become negotiable. When the wards scream, not the usual alarm, a new sound, deeper and more urgent, the audio equivalent of the castle itself crying out in pain. Students pour into corridors, professors appear from nowhere with wands drawn, and through the windows you see them, three figures in Death Eater robes and masks standing at the edge of the Forbidden Forest, visible only because they want to be visible, their dark marks burning green against the night sky like poisonous stars. They're not trying to enter, they're not attacking, they're just standing there watching, waiting for someone to respond. And Thor does. You watch from the astronomy tower as he strides across the grounds alone, the hammer blazing with barely restrained lightning, moving with the careful control of a warrior approaching a trap he recognizes but cannot avoid. The Death Eaters don't fight him. As Thor closes to within 30 feet, they disapparate with synchronized cracks, but not before one of them, you can't tell which, sends a spell streaking not toward Thor, but toward the greenhouses. The explosion is small, controlled, destroying only the third greenhouse, where Professor Sprout keeps her most dangerous specimens. Venomous tentacular vines writhe free. Devil's snare begins creeping toward the castle. And in the chaos, the Death Eater's message becomes clear. We can strike anywhere. We can threaten anyone. Your power means nothing if you cannot be everywhere at once. Thor stands in the wreckage, hammer lowered, and you see the frustration in his posture, the terrible realization that for all his strength, he's one being in a world of shadows that can scatter and regroup faster than he can chase them. Dumbledore arrives with half the staff, wands already weaving containment spells around the escaped plants, and you hear his conversation with Thor carried on the wind. They're probing your defenses, testing response times, learning your patterns. Thor's response is bitter. In war, this is called reconnaissance. They are treating this school as a battlefield, and your students as terrain. Is this normal for your world? The answer, of course, is yes. This is exactly normal for the wizarding world, a world where children are trained in combat magic by age 11. Where schools have been battlegrounds before, where the last war never really ended.
but merely paused for breath. You see Thor understand this over the following days, as the Death Eater probes continue. A Dementor sighted near Hogsmeade, a cursed object planted in a girl's bathroom, a fire started in the Olery at midnight that burns green and cold and takes 3 professors to extinguish. Each incident is small, contained, designed not to cause real damage, but to spread fear, to exhaust defenders, to demonstrate the impossibility of total protection. And with each incident, Thor becomes more withdrawn, spending long hours alone on the astronomy tower or in the Forbidden Forest with the centaurs, the weight of responsibility he never asked for settling onto his shoulders like armor forged from guilt. He's beginning to understand what you've known all along. In the wizarding world, safety is an illusion, and the only choice is which side you fight for when the illusion finally shatters. By week's end, when the ministry inspection is scheduled to arrive, Hogwarts feels less like a school and more like a fortress under siege. Professors patrol in shifts, students travel in groups, and the common rooms buzz with rumors that grow more wild and terrified with each retelling. I heard Thor fought off 20 Death Eaters in the forest, Dean Thomas whispers. My cousin in the ministry says Voldemort himself is coming to the castle, Pansy Parkinson announces with theatrical dread. My dad says the ministry is bringing a dragon to test whether Thor can be killed, Seamus Finnegan adds, somehow making it sound plausible. The truth you suspect is worse than any rumor. The ministry is coming to remove Thor, Voldemort is coming to use him, and the students of Hogwarts are caught in the middle of a political and magical power struggle that treats them as pawns rather than people. You find Luna standing at her dormitory window that night, watching the permanent storm clouds circle and circle like carrion birds waiting for death. It's going to break soon, she says without looking at you. The tension, the waiting, something has to give, and when it does, everyone will have to choose what they're willing to sacrifice for the illusion of safety. Even you, even me, even Thor, who thought he was done choosing sides in other people's wars. Morning comes too fast, and with it the ministry delegation arrives, but they don't come alone. You watch from the Great Hall as Minister Fudge himself steps from the Flu network, flanked by Umbridge, 24 auras, and something else, a contingent of curse breakers from Gringotts, wizards who specialize in dismantling dangerous enchantments and binding creatures of power. The message is clear. They're treating Thor not as a guest or even a threat, but as a magical artifact to be contained, neutralized, studied. Fudge's voice booms across the hall with false joviality. Headmaster Dumbledore, in the interest of public safety and at the urging of concerned citizens throughout Britain, I'm here to offer Mr. Thor protective custody at the ministry, where his presence won't endanger innocent children. I'm sure he'll see the wisdom in cooperating. And Thor sitting at the staff table between McGonagall and Hagrid, like he belongs there, like he's already become part of Hogwarts' strange family, sets down his goblet of pumpkin juice and smiles. It's not a kind smile. It's the smile of a warrior who's done being tested, done being patient, done pretending that laws written by frightened bureaucrats apply to gods who predate their civilization. Minister, he says, his voice carrying that ancient accent like thunder in the distance. I believe we need to have a very serious conversation about the difference between custody and captivity, and what happens when you confuse the two. The Great Hall has never been this quiet during daylight hours. Every student frozen mid-breakfast, forks suspended in air, conversations dying mid-word as the tension between Thor and Fudge becomes a physical presence pressing down on everything. The enchanted ceiling reflects the sky outside,
Roiling black clouds shot through with veins of lightning that pulse in rhythm with Thor's words, as if the weather itself is listening, waiting for permission to act. Fudge's jovial mask slips slightly, his politician's smile tightening at the edges as he processes the implied threat in Thor's tone. "Mr. Thor," he begins, voice still attempting reasonableness, despite the tremor underneath, "I assure you this is merely a precautionary measure. The Ministry has extensive facilities designed to house powerful magical beings in comfort and safety. You would be treated as an honored guest, provided with everything you need, while we work to understand your situation and facilitate your return home." His eyes slide to Dumbledore, searching for support that doesn't come. "Surely even you can see the wisdom in removing yourself from a school full of vulnerable children." Thor stands slowly, the movement deliberate, and you watch every aura in the room tense, wands rising in unison like a choreographed threat display. The hammer remains on the table, but somehow its presence feels more dangerous than if Thor were holding it, a sleeping predator that could wake at any moment. "Vulnerable," Thor repeats, tasting the word like poison. "You call your children vulnerable while you train them to fight your wars. You teach them to curse and to shield, to duel and to defend, then act surprised when they understand they're being groomed as soldiers." His gaze sweeps across the student body, and you feel the weight of it even from your seat near the Ravenclaw table. "I have walked your castle for weeks now, Minister. I have observed your classes, defense against the dark arts, where children learn to combat creatures that should not exist in a sane world, potions, where one mistake could kill, transfiguration, where reality itself bends to adolescent will. You have built an institution that pretends to be a school while actually functioning as a military academy for a war you refuse to acknowledge is already here." "That's quite enough," Umbridge interrupts, her breathy voice somehow cutting through Thor's thunder with the precision of a well-aimed curse. She steps forward, pink cardigan, obscenely cheerful against the dark robes of the auras, her toad-like face arranged in an expression of deeply offended authority. "Your opinions on our educational system are neither requested nor relevant, creature. The Minister has made a generous offer, one that I might add you are in no position to refuse. The alternative is forcible containment under Article 7 of the Regulation of Dangerous Magical Creatures Act, which grants the Ministry authority to neutralize threats to public safety by any means necessary." She produces a scroll from her robes, unfurling it with the flourish of someone who genuinely believes paperwork trumps divine power. "I have here a signed order from the Wizengamot authorizing your immediate transfer to Ministry custody. You can walk out peacefully, or you can be carried out, but you will leave Hogwarts today." The laughter that erupts from Thor is shocking in its genuine amusement, not cruel mockery, but the honest mirth of someone confronted with absurdity, so profound it circles back to being funny. "You would bind me with parchment and decrees, with laws written by mortals who will be dust before I age a single year." He picks up the hammer, casual as lifting a quill, and the temperature in the great hall plummets. Frost begins spreading across the stone floor in fractal patterns, beautiful and terrible, reaching toward the Ministry delegation like crystalline fingers. "I have seen 1,000 worlds, Undersecretary. I have witnessed civilizations that made your magic look like children's tricks, empires that spanned galaxies, beings who could unmake reality with a thought, and every one of them, every single one, eventually learned this lesson. Power answers to power, not to laws, not to bureaucracy, not to the desperate scribbling of those who mistake authority for actual strength." The frost reaches Umbridge's feet, and she stumbles backward with a small shriek that breaks the spell of her composure. Dumbledore rises then, positioning himself between Thor and the Ministry, with the careful neutrality of someone trying to prevent massacre. Minister Fudge, might I suggest we discuss this matter privately in my office? I believe tensions have escalated beyond what is productive, but he's interrupted by movement from the student tables. Harry Potter stands, his scarred forehead visible above the crowd, his voice carrying that particular Gryffindor recklessness that makes prefects age prematurely. No, we should hear this. Whatever's happening, whatever choice is being made, we should be part of it. We're not children to be protected from difficult truths. We're the ones who'll have to live with the consequences. Ron and Hermione stand beside him, then Luna, then the Weasley twins, then others. A ripple of students rising across house lines, Gryffindor and Ravenclaw, and Hufflepuff, and even a few Slytherins, refusing to be dismissed from decisions about their own safety. Fudge's face purples with bureaucratic outrage. Sit down, Mr. Potter. This is ministry business, not a student debate club. Auras, if Mr. Thor will not comply voluntarily, you are authorized to use necessary force. Begin the containment sequence, and that's when everything breaks. The lead Aura, Kingsley Shacklebolt, you recognize him from Order of the Phoenix rumors, raises his wand but doesn't cast. His face shows the internal calculation of a good man being ordered
to do something unconscionable, the visible struggle between duty and conscience. Two other auras follow his hesitation, while the rest begin weaving the complex binding spell. The Gringotts Cursebreakers taught them, gold light spiraling from multiple wands, forming chains designed to suppress magical ability at the cellular level. The spell hits Thor and wraps around him, golden links tightening, and for 3 seconds it holds. You see strain on his face, see the effort it costs him to resist. Umbridge's smile of triumph is premature by exactly 4 seconds. Thor breathes in, breathes out, and the chains explode. Not gradually, instantaneously, detonating into golden fragments that shower across the great hall like burning rain, setting small fires on tables and benches that students scramble to extinguish. The hammer rises, and lightning comes with it, not from Thor's hand, but from everywhere, from the air itself, from the stones of the castle, from the magic woven into Hogwarts foundations over a millennium. It doesn't strike the auras, doesn't attack, just exists. A web of electricity connecting floor to ceiling to walls, a cage of power that contains the entire ministry delegation without touching them, demonstrating with crystalline clarity that if Thor wanted them dead, they would already be ash. I will say this once more. Thor's voice reverberates with harmonics that shouldn't come from a human throat, layered with something older than language. I am not your subject. I am not your experiment. I am not your weapon to be aimed or your problem to be solved with paperwork and fear. I am Thor, Prince of Asgard, and I answer only to those who have earned my loyalty through honor, not demanded it through threats. The standoff holds for an eternal moment. Ministry officials trapped in a cage of lightning, students watching with expressions ranging from terror to awe, professors uncertain whether to intervene or simply document the historical moment when wizarding authority met its absolute limit. Then Dumbledore does something unexpected. He begins clapping, slow, deliberate applause that draws every eye in the hall, his blue eyes twinkling with something that might be approval or might be the satisfaction of watching pompous authority get exactly what it deserves. Well said, Thor. Well said indeed. Minister Fudge, I believe you have your answer regarding Mr. Thor's cooperation with your custody arrangement. Perhaps
Perhaps now we might discuss more collaborative solutions. The lightning fades, the cage dissolves, Thor lowers the hammer, and the temperature returns to normal, though the scorch marks on the floor and the smell of ozone remain as evidence that this was never a confrontation the Ministry could win. Fudge straightens his robes with shaking hands, his face cycling through rage and fear and political calculation before settling on damage control. This incident will be reported to the Wizengamot. Dumbledore, your protection of this entity constitutes a breach of your duties as headmaster. I am officially recommending your suspension pending a full investigation. It's a weak threat, thrown by a man desperately trying to save face, but Dumbledore merely nods graciously. You must do what you feel is right, Minister, as must we all. Now, unless you have further business at Hogwarts, I believe the students have classes to attend, and you have a ministry to return to. The dismissal is absolute, and after a moment of impotent fury, Fudge gestures curtly to his delegation. They retreat through the flue in clusters, Umbridge shooting venomous glares at Thor until the last possible moment, and then they're gone. Silence settles over the great hall, heavy and expectant, every student waiting to see what comes next. What comes next is Luna Lovegood, walking calmly to the staff table, bare feet silent on the scorched stone, and holding out her hand to Thor. That was very impressive, she says in her dreamy voice, but also quite frightening. You should probably apologize to the first years. I think several of them wet themselves. Thor looks down at her small hand, then at the students watching, then back at Luna, and slowly, carefully, he kneels again, bringing himself to her height. You are right, young seer. My anger frightens those who should not have to bear its weight. I apologize to all of you. He raises his voice to address the hall, for bringing violence to your place of learning. But I will not apologize for refusing captivity. I will not apologize for demanding dignity, and I will not apologize for standing between you and those who would sacrifice your safety for their political comfort. He takes Luna's hand gently, and you see something pass between them. An understanding, a pact, the forging of whatever strange friendship exists between ancient warriors and young seers who see too much. The storm clouds outside begin to disperse, and breakfast resumes with the surreal normality of students who've learned to eat cereal, while processing the fact that their school just became ground zero for a war between gods and governments. The emergency prophet arrives by owl post before dinner, its headline screaming in letters that seem to bleed across the page. Dumbledore harbors violent entity. Minister calls for emergency Wizengamot session. The photograph below shows Thor surrounded by lightning, the ministry delegation cowering behind overturned tables, the angle carefully chosen to make him look like an attacker rather than someone defending himself. Rita Skeeter has outdone herself, painting Thor as a rampaging monster, and Dumbledore as either dangerously senile or deliberately treasonous. The article quotes anonymous sources claiming students are traumatized, parents are organizing mass withdrawals, and the Wizengamot is seriously considering martial law at Hogwarts for student protection. You watch students read it with expressions ranging from outrage to fear, the castle dividing further into those who believe the propaganda and those who witnessed the truth. Even some who were there are starting to doubt their own memories, the ministry's narrative worming its way into their certainty like a poison that makes you question what your eyes saw. Thor spends the day after the confrontation in the Forbidden Forest with Hagrid and the Centaurs, and when he returns at twilight, there's a darkness in his expression that wasn't there before. the look of someone who's been told a terrible truth and must now decide what to do with the knowledge. You're in the library with Hermione and Luna when he finds you, moving between the stacks with surprising quiet for someone his size, and his first words make your blood run cold. "Tell me about Horcruxes." Hermione drops her quill. Luna's head tilts like she's listening to music only she can hear. You feel your stomach twist because Horcruxes are forbidden knowledge. Dark magic so terrible even the library's restricted section barely mentions them. And the fact that Thor knows the word means someone has told him something that changes everything. "Where did you hear that term?" Hermione whispers, her eyes darting around to ensure no one else is listening. Thor's jaw tightens. The centaurs read the stars. They see patterns, possibilities, threads of fate converging, and they say that the dark wizard hunting your world has done something even the stars recoil from. Split his soul to achieve immortality. They say this is why he cannot be killed, why he returned when he should have stayed dead. They say I must understand this if I am to help you. So explain, please. Hermione pulls out parchment with shaking hands and begins sketching diagrams while speaking in a voice pitched low enough that the words don't carry beyond your table. A Horcrux is an object containing a fragment of someone's soul, created through murder, the most violent act possible, which tears the soul. You hide the fragment in an object. Anchor yourself to the mortal world even if your body dies. Voldemort made multiple Horcruxes. We think at least 6, maybe 7 if you count the fragment that remains in his body. Harry destroyed one already, a diary that possessed Ginny Weasley. Dumbledore destroyed another, a ring that cursed his hand. You've seen it, blackened and dead looking, but the rest are still out there, hidden, protected by curses and guardians that would kill anyone who got close. She draws symbols you don't recognize, ancient runes that seem to squirm on the parchment. To kill Voldemort permanently, every Horcrux must be destroyed first. Otherwise he just keeps coming back, again and again, until he finally wins through sheer persistence. It's dark magic of the worst kind. Weaponized immortality built from murdered innocence. Thor listens with the stillness of a warrior processing tactical information, but you see something else in his face. Recognition and horror. "We have legends on Asgard," he says slowly, "of beings who fragmented themselves to escape death. Draugr, leeches, soul thieves who became less than alive but more than dead. Trapped in an eternal half-existence that corrupted everything they touched. We hunted them, destroyed them utterly, because a soul that chooses fragmentation over natural death becomes something fundamentally wrong, an aberration that reality itself rejects." His hand tightens on the hammer until his knuckles whiten. Your Voldemort is not a dark wizard. He is a disease wearing human shape. And you have been fighting him with half measures because you don't understand what he's become. Tell me, can your magic destroy these Horcruxes? Luna answers before Hermione can, her voice dreamy but certain. Basilisk venom, fiend fire, anything powerful enough to damage something beyond magical repair. The problem isn't destroying them, it's finding them. Voldemort hid them cunningly, in places of personal significance, protected by magic and monsters and misdirection. Some we know about, some we only suspect, and some she trails off, her eyes finding yours with uncomfortable intensity. Some are hiding in plain sight, waiting to be recognized. The conversation is interrupted by the sound of screams, distant but clear, coming from the direction of Hogsmeade. Every student in the library freezes, heads turning toward the windows where you can see smoke rising from the village, like a black pillar against the evening sky. The wards don't scream because whatever's happening is beyond Hogwarts' boundaries, technically outside the school's protection, and Thor is moving before anyone else, hammer in hand, charging toward the entrance with a speed that leaves you scrambling to follow. By the time you reach the grounds, half the castle is already there. Students pressed against windows, professors gathering near the gates, and Dumbledore's voice carrying across the chaos. All students return to your common rooms immediately. This is not a request, but you don't return. Neither do Harry, Ron, Hermione, Luna, or a dozen other students who've decided that hiding while people die is no longer acceptable. You follow Thor through the gates, ignoring
Professor's shouts, running toward the village where Death Eaters have decided to send their clearest message yet. Hogsmeade burns, not with natural fire, but with fiend fire, those cursed flames that take the shape of beasts and hunt living targets, consuming everything they touch while growing stronger. The Three Broomsticks is engulfed, its walls collapsing inward as fire serpents coil through the structure. The structure, Honeyduke's, is next, its candy-colored facade blackening as fire dragons claw their way across the roof. Civilians run screaming through the streets, some on fire, others carrying children or dragging injured friends, and standing in the center of the chaos are 5 Death Eaters in full regalia, wands raised, casting curse after curse into the fleeing crowds, not to kill, but to herd. They're driving people toward the school, creating a wave of terrified refugees that will crash against Hogwarts gates, forcing the professors to choose between protection and rescue. And at the edge of the flames, barely visible through the smoke, stands a 6th figure, taller than the others, emanating an aura of cold power that makes the air itself recoil. Not Voldemort, not yet, but someone high in his hierarchy, someone powerful enough that even the Death Eaters give them respectful distance. Thor doesn't hesitate. He charges into the flames like they're fog, the hammer blazing with lightning that meets fiend fire in a collision of elements that shouldn't be possible. Fire versus electricity, cursed magic versus divine fury, and the fire loses. It doesn't extinguish, but retreats, the beast shapes scattering like startled animals as Thor's lightning carves paths through the inferno. He reaches the first group of trapped civilians, a family of 4, the parents shielding their children with their bodies, and his voice carries absolute command. Run, follow the lightning back to the gates. He creates a corridor of safe passage through the flames, electricity forming walls that the fire cannot cross, and refugees stream through it in sobbing, grateful waves. But the Death Eaters adapt. One of them points their wand not at Thor, but at the shrieking shack, and the building explodes, not with fire, but with a curse that turns stone to shrapnel, sending deadly fragments screaming toward the fleeing civilians like 1,000 knives. Thor throws himself between the shrapnel and the refugees, and you watch horrified as dozens of stone fragments slam into his back, tearing through his clothes and drawing blood that steams in the heat. He doesn't fall, doesn't even slow, just keeps advancing on the Death Eaters with the inexorable patience of a storm that knows it will eventually consume everything in its path. The Death Eaters tried everything, killing curses that splash against him like water, binding spells that shatter the moment they form, Cruciator's curses that make him stumble but don't stop him. And then the tall figure steps forward, pulling back their hood to reveal a woman's face, beautiful and terrible and coldly amused. Bellatrix Lestrange. Her voice is a mad cackle that cuts through the chaos. The Thunder God, how delightful. Tell me, divine creature, How many can you save at once? Because while you're here playing hero, she gestures casually, and 3 Death Eaters disappear with synchronized cracks. My friends are visiting the school, specifically the hospital wing, where all those wounded from our earlier attacks are resting, unguarded, vulnerable. Such a shame if something happened to them while Hogwarts' great protector was distracted saving peasants in a burning village. You see the calculation cross Thor's face, the terrible math of triage, the warrior's nightmare of being forced to choose which innocents to save. And then Hermione is shouting, "Go, we'll handle Hogsmeade. Get back to the school." She's already casting water spells, her wand movements precise, despite her shaking hands, and other students are joining her, Harry throwing up shield charms, Ron helping injured civilians to their feet, Luna somehow calm in the chaos, directing people away from the flames with that dreamy certainty that makes them trust her. Thor looks at these children, because that's what they are, children, forced to fight adult wars with inadequate training and too much courage, and you see something break in him, the resignation, the acceptance that in this world, at this time, everyone must be a soldier whether they choose it or not. He nods once, then launches himself into the sky, lightning propelling him back toward Hogwarts faster than any broomstick, and Bellatrix's laughter follows him like a curse. Run, little god, run and save your precious students, and know that every time you save one, we'll threaten 10 more. You cannot be everywhere, you cannot protect everyone, and eventually, inevitably, you will fail. The hospital wing assault is already underway when Thor crashes through the window in a shower of glass and lightning, and what he finds there confirms Voldemort's true strategy. They're not trying to kill the patients, they're trying to take them. 3 Death Eaters have 6 students levitated and unconscious, preparing to dissipate and use them as hostages, as leverage, as the chains that will bind a god more effectively than any spell. Thor's roar shakes the castle foundations, and the Death Eaters learn what happens when a warrior who's held back for weeks of patient diplomacy finally stops caring about restraint. The fight is short, brutal, and utterly one-sided. One Death Eater's wand explodes when Thor's lightning hits it, the magical backlash knocking them unconscious. Another tries to apparate and finds themselves frozen mid-disapparition, caught between spaces, screaming as Thor's power disrupts their escape. The third manages to fire a killing curse, but Thor catches it, actually catches it on the hammer's surface, where it crackles and dissipates harmlessly, and the look of absolute terror on the Death Eater's face before Thor's fist connects with their jaw is almost pitiable. Madame Pomfrey emerges from where she'd been protecting her patients behind a barricade of hospital beds, her face white with shock. They said, Voldemort wants to negotiate, that he'll trade the students' safety for your cooperation, that he's offering you a choice. Serve him, or watch everyone you've sworn to protect die slowly. Thor stands among unconscious Death Eaters and rescued students, bleeding from a dozen wounds, covered in soot and glass fragments, and his voice when he speaks is so quiet it's terrifying. There will be no negotiation, there will be no cooperation, there will be no choice. He raises the hammer, and lightning dances across its surface in patterns that might be words in a language older than stars. Voldemort believes I am a weapon he can aim or a shield he can bypass. He is wrong on both counts. I am a storm that chooses its own direction, and I have chosen. The lightning flares bright enough to illuminate the entire castle, and somewhere in the distance, in a graveyard where dark rituals have stained the earth, Voldemort feels it, feels the declaration of war from a power he'd underestimated,
from a being who tried diplomacy and patience, and now pushed beyond both, has remembered what he truly is. The Dark Lord's lipless mouth curves into something approximating satisfaction. Finally, the god shows his true nature. Finally, the game becomes interesting. And with a gesture, Voldemort summons his inner circle and begins planning not how to defeat Thor, but how to break him. The tracking spell Dumbledore teaches Thor that night is ancient magic, blood magic, the kind that requires sacrifice and consent, and comes with prices the young don't understand until they've already paid them. You watch from the doorway of the headmaster's office as Thor pricks his finger on a silver blade, letting 3 drops of blood fall onto a map of Britain, while Dumbledore speaks words in a language that makes your ears ache. The blood moves across the parchment like it's alive, seeking, searching, drawn to the magical signature of dark magic that's tasted Thor's power and left traces in the wounds Bellatrix inflicted. It will lead you to him, Dumbledore says, his voice heavy with the weight of sending someone to almost certain death. But Thor, you must understand, he cannot be killed, not permanently, not until every Horcrux is destroyed. If you face him now, the best you can achieve is temporary victory. He will return. He always returns. Thor's blue eyes remain fixed on the map, watching his blood trace a path to Little Hangleton, to a graveyard whose name carries echoes of old murders and older curses. Then I will hurt him badly enough that he thinks twice before threatening children again. Sometimes, Headmaster, temporary victories are all that keep people alive long enough to achieve permanent ones. He leaves at midnight, refusing company despite Harry's protests, despite Hermione's logical arguments about backup, despite Luna's quiet certainty that the stars say you shouldn't face this alone. But Thor is adamant, his warrior's pride mixing with genuine concern. This is not your battle. You are students, not soldiers, regardless of what your world demands. I will not bring children to fight a monster. The words sting because they're both protective and dismissive, and you see the frustration on Harry's face, the boy who's already died and returned, who's already faced Voldemort multiple times, being told he's too young to help. But Thor is already gone, launching himself into the sky with a crack of thunder that rattles windows across the castle, following the blood trail that glows only for him, a red thread connecting God to dark wizard across miles of British countryside. You watch from the astronomy tower as lightning splits the night sky, heading southeast, and Luna stands beside you whispering predictions that sound like prayers. He'll win but lose, save them but break, return but changed. The graveyard takes something from everyone who enters. Even gods pay the toll. The graveyard is exactly as Harry described it from his encounter last year, overgrown with weeds that seem to move when you're not looking directly at them, tombstones leaning at angles that shouldn't be structurally possible, and at the center, the massive marble monument to Tom Riddle Sr. that Voldemort uses as his throne room. Thor lands in a crater of scorched earth, the hammer blazing like a sun that refuses to acknowledge this is a place of darkness and death. Death Eaters emerge from the shadows, dozens of them, maybe 50, more than Thor has faced at once, their white masks gleaming in the hammer's light, like skulls pretending to be alive. They don't attack immediately. They circle, wands raised, forming a perimeter that's less about containment and more about witness. They want to see this, want to watch their master face the Thunder God and emerge victorious, want the story they can tell later about.
Knight Voldemort proved himself superior to beings who claim divinity, and then he appears, not with dramatic flourish, but with simple presence. One moment the monument is empty, The next Voldemort stands atop it, red eyes glowing with malevolent intelligence, his too pale skin seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. Thor of Asgard. Voldemort's voice is high and cold, carrying across the graveyard with unnatural clarity, each word precisely articulated, like a surgeon describing an incision. How kind of you to accept my invitation. I was beginning to think you lacked the courage to face me directly, preferring instead to play hero to ungrateful children, who will forget you the moment you become inconvenient. Thor doesn't rise to the bait, just stands there with the hammer resting easy in his grip, every muscle relaxed but ready. You attack the innocent to draw me out. You threaten children because you fear facing warriors. This does not speak of courage, Tom Riddle. This speaks of a coward who's learned to dress his cowardice in philosophy and call it strategy. The use of Voldemort's birth name lands like a physical blow. You can see it in the way several Death Eaters flinch, in the way Voldemort's lipless mouth tightens infinitesimally. That name, the Dark Lord says softly, dangerously, died long ago. I am Lord Voldemort now. I am the future of magical Britain, and you, Thunder God, are an obstacle that I will remove with the same efficiency I remove all obstacles. Avada Kedavra. The killing curse streaks green and deadly through the darkness, and Thor doesn't dodge. He swings the hammer in a controlled arc, and lightning meets death magic in a collision that explodes outward, blinding everyone, the shockwave flattening tombstones and knocking Death Eaters off their feet. When the light clears, both combatants stand unchanged, but the ground between them has been reduced to glass, sand superheated by the energy release, now cooled into a jagged black mirror. Voldemort's expression shows surprise quickly masked by calculation. Interesting. You can deflect the killing curse, but can you deflect 50? He gestures, and the Death Eaters raise their wands in unison, a firing squad of wizard assassins channeling humanity's oldest and darkest magic. 50 voices speak 2 words in perfect synchronization. Avada Kedavra. 50 bolts of green light converge on Thor like spears thrown by an army. And this time he does move. Fast. Impossibly fast. The hammer becomes a shield and a weapon simultaneously, spinning in arcs that create barriers of lightning, deflecting some curses, absorbing others. And you realize, watching through a scrying spell Hermione rigged to follow Thor, that even gods have limits. Even Thor cannot block 50 death curses without cost. 3 get through. 1 grazes his shoulder, leaving a wound that smokes and refuses to heal. Another clips his thigh, and his leg buckles briefly before his godly constitution forces it to hold. The third hits him square in the chest, directly over his heart, and Thor staggers, actually staggers, falls to one knee. The Death Eaters cheer, certain they've witnessed a killing blow, but Thor is breathing, labored, pained, each inhale sounding like it tears something inside him, but breathing, impossible. Voldemort hisses, and for the first time you hear genuine confusion beneath the cold control. The killing curse destroys life at the molecular level. Nothing survives it. Nothing. Thor rises slowly, one hand pressed against his chest where the curse hit, and when he speaks his voice carries harmonics of pain and fury mixed together. I have died before, wizard. Died and walked the roads beyond life. Spoken with those who judge the honored dead, and returned because my story was not finished. Your curse is powerful, yes, but it kills mortal flesh, and I am not mortal. I am not eternal either. I can die. I will die someday, but not today, not by your hand. Not like this. The battle that follows is terrible and beautiful in equal measure. A clash of powers that the wizarding world has no framework to understand. Thor summons lightning from clear skies, bolts that strike with surgical precision, targeting Death Eaters who scream and fall and do not rise. Voldemort counters with curses that shouldn't exist. Dark magic so old it predates the unforgivables. Spells that rot flesh and boil blood, and turn bones to powder. The graveyard becomes a war zone, tombstones exploding into shrapnel, the earth itself cracking under the strain of magic and godhood colliding. Death Eaters try to flee, and Thor lets them, focusing entirely on Voldemort, and you see the Dark Lord's strategy shift in real time. He stops trying to kill Thor, and starts trying to contain him, using the environment itself as a weapon. Bones reanimate from graves, forming skeletal warriors that don't need to defeat Thor, just slow him down. The earth liquefies into quicksand that grabs at Thor's feet. Chains of dark magic wrap around the hammer, trying to pull it from his grip. And when that fails, Voldemort does something desperate and brilliant. He sacrifices 3 Death Eaters, just kills them, casual as swatting flies, and uses their deaths to power a binding ritual that creates a cage of cursed energy around Thor, not to harm him, but to hold him. And it works. For 30 seconds it works. Thor stands trapped inside geometric patterns of dark light, the hammer blazing uselessly as he strains against bonds forged from murdered souls. Voldemort approaches slowly, savoring the moment, his wand tracing patterns in the air that you recognize from Hermione's Horcrux research, preparation for the creation of a new soul fragment. You will make an excellent Horcrux, Voldemort says almost tenderly. Imagine it, a fragment of Lord Voldemort, bound inside a god's body, controlling it, using it as my vessel. The wizarding world would fall within days, the muggles within months, and you would be conscious throughout it all, trapped inside your own flesh, watching as I use your power to destroy everything you've tried to protect. He raises his wand, speaks the first word of the ritual, and that's when Thor stops trying to break the cage and starts breaking himself. He channels lightning inward, into his own body, overloading every cell with electrical energy, until he becomes more lightning than flesh, and the cage, designed to hold matter, not energy, shatters. The backlash hits Voldemort like a physical blow, sending him tumbling backward, and Thor is on him instantly, the hammer raised for a killing blow. But he stops, freezes mid-swing, because Voldemort is laughing, actually laughing, blood dripping from his lipless mouth, and his words are poison wrapped in truth. Strike me down, God, shatter this body, see how much good it does you. I have anchored myself to this world 7 times over, 7 fragments of my soul, hidden where you'll never find them. Kill this body, and I'll simply build another, stronger, better prepared. You cannot win this war with strength alone. You can only prolong it, make it more painful for everyone involved. Thor's hand trembles on the hammer's handle, the warrior's instinct warring with strategic reality. He knows Voldemort is right, knows that killing him here would be satisfying, but ultimately futile, that the Horcruxes must be destroyed first, or this fight becomes an endless loop of violence and resurrection. Then I will find them, Thor says quietly, lowering the hammer but not his guard. I will hunt every fragment of your shattered soul across this entire world. I will break every protection, defeat every guardian, destroy every anchor that keeps you bound to life. And when there is nothing left of you but the fragment in your body, then and only then will I return to finish this. Voldemort's laughter dies, his red eyes narrowing with calculation,
and something that might be respect or might be recognition of a worthy opponent. Bold words, Thunder God. But while you play treasure hunter, while you waste weeks or months tracking down objects you can barely identify, my Death Eaters will continue their work. More attacks, more dead, more children bleeding in the halls of your precious Hogwarts. Can you bear that cost? Can you watch them suffer knowing you could have ended me here and now, even temporarily? It's the perfect trap, moral blackmail wrapped in strategic truth. Fight Voldemort now and achieve nothing permanent, or hunt Horcruxes while innocents die. Thor stands in the ruins of the graveyard, surrounded by unconscious or dead Death Eaters, facing an enemy who can't be killed, and you see the weight of impossible choices settle onto his shoulders like armor forged from grief. I will do both, he says finally. I will hunt your soul fragments while protecting those you target. I will sleep less, fight more, push myself beyond even godly limits, if that's what it takes. Because that is what warriors do, Riddle. We find ways to win even when victory seems impossible. Watch me prove it. He launches skyward without another word, leaving Voldemort alone in the graveyard with his dead servants and his Pyrrhic victory. The Dark Lord watches the lightning fade into the distance, then turns to the few Death Eaters still conscious. He's broken, Voldemort says with quiet satisfaction. Not his body, that will take more work, but his spirit. He's accepted responsibility for protecting everyone, defeating me and hunting Horcruxes simultaneously. An impossible task that will grind him down piece by piece until he makes mistakes. And mistakes, my friends, are what we exploit. Back at Hogwarts, you watch from the astronomy tower as Thor lands in the courtyard and simply collapses, falling to his knees in the fountain where he'd spoken with Luna days before. The wounds from the killing curses still smoke, refusing to heal properly, and his shoulders shake with something that might be exhaustion, or rage or grief, possibly all three. Luna finds him first, naturally, her bare feet leaving wet prints on the stone, as she wades into the fountain to sit beside him. You did well, she says in her dreamy voice, and Thor laughs, bitter and broken. I achieved nothing. He still lives. His followers scatter to regroup, and now I've committed to an impossible mission that will let him kill more innocents while I play archaeologist searching for pieces of his soul. Luna takes his hand gently. You achieved something important. You showed him you're not afraid, and fear, Thor, is the only weapon he truly understands. Everything else is just noise. 3 weeks pass in a blur of blood and lightning, and choices that have no good answers. Thor becomes something between a teacher and a weapon, between protector and destroyer, spending his days training students in combat tactics that have nothing to do with magic, and everything to do with survival instinct. He shows them how to read body language before spells are cast, how to use terrain as cover, how to prioritize targets in multi-opponent scenarios. Lessons no Hogwarts professor would ever teach, because they transform children
into soldiers more effectively than any dark arts class could.
The Ministry screams about it. Naturally, the Daily Prophet runs headlines like Thunder God militarizes Hogwarts students and Dumbledore allows combat training for minors. But the students keep coming to Thor's sessions in the courtyard, drawn by the simple truth that his lessons keep them alive when Death Eater attacks come, and the attacks keep coming. Probing strikes that test defenses and wear down resolve, and kill just enough people to make everyone terrified, without killing so many that international intervention becomes inevitable. The Horcrux hunt proceeds with agonizing slowness. Dumbledore shares what he knows, the locket somewhere in a cave protected by inferi and dark water, the cup hidden in Gringotts under layers of goblin security and curse work. Others he only suspects exist, but cannot confirm. Thor approaches each location with methodical warrior's patience, but the protections are designed specifically to resist power like his. The caves in Ferry don't fear lightning. They're already dead, animated corpses that swarm in thousands, and Thor must burn them individually, exhaustingly, while avoiding the poisoned water that would kill even him with sufficient exposure. The Gringotts' attempt ends in disaster. The goblins detect the intrusion, lockdown protocols engage, and Thor barely escapes with his life while wizard-goblin relations deteriorate to the worst point in decades. Each failure costs time. Each day wasted hunting artifacts is another day. Voldemort strengthens his position, recruits more followers, and plans grander atrocities. You watch Thor age in ways that have nothing to do with years, and everything to do with accumulated weight. The weight of promises he cannot keep, victories he cannot secure, and people he cannot save, no matter how fast he moves or how hard he fights. The breaking point comes on a Tuesday morning, when Death Eaters hit Diagon Alley during peak shopping hours, targeting the crowd with fiendfire and killing curses, and coordinated cruelty designed to maximize casualties and media coverage. Thor arrives within minutes, lightning blazing, and saves dozens, but not hundreds, not enough. Bodies lie in the streets, some so young. They're clearly Hogwarts students on weekend trips, and Rita Skeeter's photographers capture every moment. Thor kneeling beside a dead child, his face twisted with anguish. Thor fighting 3 Death Eaters while civilians burn in the background. Thor standing alone in the wreckage afterward, covered in blood and ash and failure. The headline writes itself, Thunder God's protection, not enough. The article argues what everyone's thinking but few say aloud. Maybe having Thor here makes things worse, draws more attacks, escalates violence that might otherwise stay contained. Maybe the best thing he could do for the wizarding world is leave. Go back to Asgard if he ever figures out how, or just disappear into the wilderness, where Voldemort can't use him as a rallying point for increasingly desperate tactics. That night, Dumbledore calls an emergency meeting in his office. Thor, the senior professors, Harry, Hermione, and Luna, because the headmaster has apparently decided that pretending students aren't central to this war serves no purpose anymore. The conversation is brutal in its honesty, voices raised in ways you've never heard adults speak in front of students, all pretense of control abandoned in favor of desperate problem solving. McGonagall argues for evacuation, sending students home until the Voldemort situation resolves, but Molly Weasley, present via flu, her face haggard from weeks of fear, points out that homes aren't safe either, that Death Eaters are targeting families specifically to draw out Order members, and Thor, Snape, his usual sneer replaced with exhausted pragmatism, suggests using Thor as bait for a trap, luring Voldemort into a confrontation on their terms, but Dumbledore shakes his head wearily. Tom is too careful for obvious traps. He'll simply send more Death Eaters, more innocents, wearing us down through attrition until we make mistakes. The circular argument continues until Thor finally speaks, his voice cutting through the debate like lightning through fog. There is another option, one you're all avoiding, because it requires sacrifice none of you want to make. He stands, moving to the window where the permanent storm clouds still circle Hogwarts like a crown that's become a prison. I can forge a ward, not like your wizard wards, something older, something that predates your magic entirely. Asgardian protection, powered by my life force, anchored to this location and everyone who claims it as sanctuary. It would make Hogwarts truly impregnable, turn the castle into a fortress that no dark magic could breach, no Death Eater could enter, no curse could penetrate. The room goes silent, everyone processing the implications, and Hermione is the first to understand. Powered by your life force, you mean it would drain you constantly. You'd be giving up your strength, your power, maybe even your lifespan to maintain it. Thor nods slowly. The ward would last as long as I do. Decades, maybe centuries if I ration my power carefully. Long enough for you to hunt the Horcruxes, defeat Voldemort properly, rebuild your world into something better. But I would be bound here, unable to leave, unable to fight beyond these walls. I would become less warrior and more lighthouse, as Luna once called it, a constant beacon that protects by its existence rather than its actions. Luna stands, her voice dreamy but her eyes sharp with understanding. You'd be sacrificing everything as guardian about yourself. The battles, the glory, the freedom to choose your wars. You'd become a monument to a cause that isn't even yours originally. Thor's smile is sad and certain. Luna, from the moment I landed in your great hall and chose to stand between frightened children and those who would harm them, this became my cause, my war, my responsibility. And if I must pay with everything I am to ensure you survive to adulthood, to ensure all of you have the chance to become the heroes your world desperately needs, then that is a price I'm willing to pay. The offer hangs in the air, impossible to accept and impossible to refuse, and you see the terrible calculation happening on every adult face. Accept Thor's sacrifice and save thousands of lives at the cost of one noble being's freedom, or refuse, and watch the casualties mount while clinging to principle. Dumbledore's voice, when he finally speaks, sounds older than you've ever heard. Thor, I cannot, will not, demand such a sacrifice. If you choose this path, it must be your choice entirely, made with full understanding of what you're surrendering. The ritual takes 3 days to prepare, requires materials that shouldn't exist in the wizarding world, metals from fallen stars, water from springs that flow upward, blood voluntarily given by those the ward will protect. Every student over 4th year contributes a single drop, pressing their thumb to an ancient stone that records their magical signature and binds them to Thor's protection. The younger students are deemed too young to consent to being part of such magic, though many argue through tears that they want to help, want to be part of saving their school. You watch Thor inscribe runes across Hogwarts foundations, crawling through dungeons and climbing towers, marking every stone with symbols that glow faintly blue and smell like ozone and distant thunder. He doesn't sleep, doesn't eat much, just works with the single-minded focus of a warrior approaching his final battle. Except this battle won't end. Not for decades, not until his borrowed time finally runs out. Luna follows him constantly during the preparation, not speaking much but providing companionship that Thor accepts with quiet gratitude. And you hear fragments of their conversations, discussions of Asgard's golden halls, of battles fought in realms whose names you can't pronounce, of a mother who taught him magic, and a brother who taught him loss. The ward activation happens at dawn on the 4th day, with every student and professor gathered in the courtyard to bear witness. Thor stands at the center of a massive runic circle, the hammer held before him like an offering, and his voice when he speaks, the incantation carries harmonics that make reality itself seem to vibrate in sympathy. Light pours from the runes, blue, white, and impossibly bright, flowing through the castle's stones like blood through veins, connecting every wall and window and door into a unified whole that pulses with protective power. The storm clouds above Hogwarts spin faster, lightning arcing between them in patterns that mirror the runes below. And you feel it when the ward snaps into place. A pressure change, a sense of absolute safety that settles over everything, like a blanket woven from lightning and oath-bound determination. Death Eaters testing the boundaries that same morning find themselves repelled by barriers they cannot see or understand, their spells splashing harmlessly against invisible walls, their apparition attempts depositing them miles away from their intended destination. Hogwarts has become a fortress, and Thor has become its guardian, willingly, deliberately, irrevocably. But the cost becomes apparent within hours. Thor moves slower, his usual godly grace replaced by something more human, more fragile. The wounds from his graveyard battle, which had been slowly healing, stop healing entirely, settling into permanent scars that will mark him forever. His lightning, when summoned, flickers weakly compared to the columns of fury he commanded before,
and you realize with dawning horror that he's given away most of his power, locked it into the ward structure, keeping only enough for himself to remain functional. He's still stronger than any wizard, still capable of defending himself, but the gap has narrowed from impossible to nearly improbable. Luna finds you crying in the library that afternoon, your tears staining homework you can't focus on, and she sits beside you with that infuriating calmness. He chose this, she says simply. He could have left, could have kept searching for a way home, could have kept fighting Voldemort directly even knowing it was futile. But he chose to be our lighthouse instead, to sacrifice his storm so we could have shelter. You want to argue, want to rage against the unfairness of a god giving up divinity for mortals who'll probably forget him in a generation. But Luna just squeezes your hand. The sad thing about lighthouses is that they never get to see the ships they save reaching harbor. They just shine and trust that somewhere in the darkness, someone finds their way home because of it. Voldemort's response comes swiftly and predictably. He pivots his entire strategy away from Hogwarts, focusing instead on targets Thor can no longer reach. Muggle villages, isolated wizarding families, government buildings in London, anywhere the Thunder God's protection doesn't extend. The casualties actually increase, perversely, because Voldemort no longer needs to be cautious about engaging Thor directly. He can strike with impunity, knowing that his greatest threat is chained to a castle in Scotland, reduced to passive defender rather than active
Hunter, the Daily Prophet, ever consistent in its cruelty, runs editorials questioning whether Thor's sacrifice was strategic wisdom or selfish cowardice. Thunder God hides behind Ward, while Britain Burns becomes the narrative that half the wizarding world accepts as truth. Harry rages against it, writes letters to the editor that are never published, gets into fistfights with students who repeat the propaganda. But Thor himself seems unbothered by the criticism, spending his days walking the castle grounds, checking and reinforcing the ward, and teaching any student who asks him about courage that has nothing to do with power and everything to do with choosing to stand where you're needed, even when it costs you everything you wanted to be. The war continues, dragging on through seasons that blur together. Autumn rains, winter snows, spring blooms that feel wrong when so many have died to see them. The Order of the Phoenix hunts Horcruxes with Thor's strategic advice, destroying the locket after a brutal underwater battle, recovering the cup from Gringotts in a heist that becomes legend, tracking down the diadem in the Room of Requirement, where it had hidden for decades. Each Horcrux destroyed weakens Voldemort incrementally, makes him more cautious, more desperate, and eventually, inevitably, he makes the mistake Dumbledore predicted. He attacks the Ministry itself, attempting a coup that would give him governmental control and legitimacy. The battle is catastrophic, dozens dead on both sides, but Aurors and Order members working together finally corner him, and in the chaos, Harry Potter, now 17, scarred and hardened by war, destroys Voldemort's final Horcrux with Gryffindor's sword and his mother's defiant courage. The Dark Lord falls, truly and permanently, his last killing curse absorbed by Harry's sacrificial protection, and the war ends not with celebration, but with exhausted relief that tastes like ashes in everyone's mouth. Thor hears about Voldemort's death while standing on the astronomy tower, watching the sun rise over a Britain that's finally, tentatively, beginning to believe it might survive. Luna joins him, as she always does for significant moments, and together they watch the storm clouds. His storm clouds, the last visible manifestation of his power, begin to dissipate, not quickly, but gradually, thinning over hours and days until the sky above Hogwarts is clear for the first time in months. The ward will hold, he says quietly, answering Luna's unspoken question. It's anchored now, woven so deeply into the castle's structure that it will persist long after I'm gone. My power sustains it. Yes, but it no longer requires conscious effort. Just existence. Just being here. Being the lighthouse. Luna nods, then asks the question you've all been wondering. Do you regret it? Giving up Asgard? Giving up your strength? Giving up the storms that were yours to command? Thor is silent for a long moment, watching students emerge onto the grounds below to celebrate news of Voldemort's death with the messy, chaotic joy of those who've survived when they shouldn't have. I regret much, he says finally. I regret every person I couldn't save, every battle I lost, every choice that led to someone's death. But this becoming your guardian, your lighthouse, I do not regret, because look, he gestures to the students below, laughing and crying and alive. They get to grow up. They get to become whatever they choose, free from the shadow of a dark wizard who would have consumed them. That is worth any sacrifice. That is worth giving up thunder itself. Years pass. You graduate, become an aura, fight in smaller conflicts against Death Eater remnants and dark creatures that test Hogwarts' new wards and find them unbreakable. Thor remains, aging slowly but visibly, his golden hair turning silver, his warrior's build becoming leaner, more refined, less divine, and more human. With each passing decade, he becomes part of Hogwarts mythology, the Storm Guardian, who gave up godhood to protect children. And every generation of students learns his story, though with each retelling, the truth gets softer, easier, the sharp edges of sacrifice, worn smooth by time's passage. Some students visit him in his tower, seeking advice or simply company, and he welcomes them with the patience of someone who's learned that small moments of connection matter more than grand gestures of power. Luna visits most often, even after graduation, even after marriage and children, bringing her own daughter to meet the god who became a lighthouse. And on your last visit, before transferring to a position abroad, you ask him the question you've carried for 20 years. Was it worth it? Truly, all those years bound here, while the world moved on without you. Thor looks at you with eyes that have faded from electric blue to something gentler, wiser, and his smile carries the weight of choices made and consequences accepted. Every morning, I wake and feel the ward humming through the castle's stones, protecting thousands of children who don't know my name and don't need to. Every night, I stand on this tower and watch them laugh and learn and live in safety I purchased with power I no longer have. And every day between, I am reminded that glory fades but legacy endures, not in songs sung about your strength, but in lives saved by your sacrifice. He pauses, watching lightning flicker on the distant horizon, natural lightning now, not his, and adds softly, I was Thor of Asgard, prince and warrior, wielder of Mjolnir, and commander of storms. Now I am simply Thor, guardian of Hogwarts, the god who chose children over glory. And perhaps, in the end, that is the better story, the one worth telling, the one that matters. You leave him there on his tower, silhouetted against a sky no longer his to command. And as you apparate away you wonder, did Thor save Hogwarts? Or did Hogwarts save Thor? Giving a warrior god a purpose more meaningful than endless battles in a war that never really ends. The answer, you suspect, is both, and neither, and something in between that has no words. But every student who graduates safely from that castle understands in their bones